This call is now being recorded. This call is now being transcribed.
Hello. Here is a video going over the part B for the Business is War simulations, the profit and loss statements that are a type of financial statement that will allow you to determine the net worth of your company after your income and taking away your expenses. That will also, in the end, determine how much taxes you owe, which is an important part because you need that number to determine how much cash you're losing moving into the coming year. So there are really good instructions here if you read along, but if you have tried and are stuck, you found your way to this video, and I'll just give you an example of doing taxes. The big important thing and the only way to do this properly is to make sure that your summary sheet is also properly filled in. So if there are missing sections, right, or empty cells that should be filled in, that's going to cause issues and lead to some mistakes. So make sure that you're going through your PDFs, your quarterly update files to make sure everything is accurately input. If that's done, then you can head over to the profit loss statement and start putting in the corresponding amounts and then calculating a number of subtotals to eventually get to our net before tax, which we use to calculate our tax, and then apply a deduction for a tax-free incentive from our auto factories if we used any, and that will give us our net profit. And then we can use the taxes minus the deduction to determine our taxes. So let's go through one by one. The first line is our sales. This is the total amount of money that we earned from the FIU sales on our summary sheet for the entire year. So we actually need to scroll down to the FIU sales section, and you might have more than one industry. If that's the case, you'll need to add all of your FIU sales. In this example, it's just agriculture, and I can select everything I've sold. The add bonuses should be incorporated in here when I'm multiplying by 1.08, for instance, for an 8% boost. That's going to give me the incorporated advertisement. I don't need to include the cost of the ads shown above. The sales is just the profit I gain from selling, right, all the way up till December. So this looks like I have made 3.3 million with some change. So I can either remember this number, or I might instead choose to calculate the sum. I'm probably going to do this to make my life a bit easier using a built-in Google Sheets equation equals sum. And I'm going to select all the numbers from January till December and hit enter. And it's now calculated for me. I'm going to do this a number of times. So I'm going to actually extend this up to the top and down to the bottom by clicking on the bottom right corner where there is a blue dot. So that's going to show me up until December, because that's where I cut off the equation. I'm not including January, February, or any of that because taxes are based on the calendar year up until December. So all of my sales up until December give me 3.3 million. I'm going to copy that amount and paste it by pasting values only here to make sure it's not getting any of the calculation or code. It's just giving me the number. Then I'm going to go to investment growth, which is also known as investment gold appreciation. In this example, I have none, so my total gold appreciation is going to be 0. If I had some, I wouldn't include the total amount of gold or either of these, gold bought or remaining gold. The only part I need to add in is the middle row here, gold appreciation 5%. So for me, that's going to be 0. Then I get my first subtotal. Every subtotal, every one of these green boxes in this assignment is going to come along with an instruction of what to do to calculate that subtotal. For instance, this subtotal, I need to add. And what do I add? For every subtotal, you're going to look at the 2 lines immediately above it. So we're going to look at sales plus investment growth. So this is going to be equal to sales plus investment growth added together. So obviously, it's just the same as my sales. All right, on to cost of goods sold. This is my RMU purchases. So I'm going to look at how much I've spent on RMUs all the way up to December. The bottom corner here is showing me 1.2 million. I'm going to copy my sum equation from this total row up to December again, and I'm going to paste that here. But I also need to add in conversions and adds. So I'm actually going to make this into an equation. This is going to be equals to the amount from RMU purchases plus I need to find the amount I spent on conversions, which is this row here. Another 600,000. So I'm going to copy that and paste it into here as, no, not plain text. We don't want that to be a $sign. I would just go Control V. It's not liking that, so I'm going to have to manually get rid of some of the decimals and $signs. You might have to do the same. And then finally, we have to calculate how much we spent on advertisements of 153 up to December. All right, and if you don't want to use any of the equations, you can just write down these numbers or add them in your calculator. For me, I'm going to copy this 153,000 and I'm going to paste it in here and get rid of my $sign and my comma. And now it's telling me that my total COGS is $2 million, 2.035 million. Another subtotal, but this time it instructs me to subtract. So I'm going to look at the 2 lines above and I'm going to subtract them. So it's going to be equal to this 3.3 million, subtract this equals my subtotal approximately 3 million. This one, really easily, just copy the subtotal above. So I can go Control C, Control V, or I could have done an equal, click. Both will work. I could go equals this. There we go. Fixed expenses, total money paid towards fixed expenses. That is another easy spot to find on the summary sheet. So I'm going to add up all those numbers to December, not including January, is 464,000. Again, I'm going to copy this and paste it here. Values only, so I don't mess up the equation. This subtotal, again, is subtracting, so I'm going to subtract 1.2 million minus 460,000, down to 830,000 as my new subtotal. Depreciation is a bit of a trickier calculation. It's going to be 10% worth of all the fixed assets. That is our constructions like factories, whether they're standard or auto, as well as warehouses, whether they're upgrades or the basic. And it's everything that's actually been completed by the end of the year. My favorite way to determine that, whether it's completed or not, is just to look at the inventory in December. So the inventory in December is showing me, I don't care about RMUs or FIUs. I can ignore those. Those are not fixed assets, and we're looking for the worth of fixed assets. Then I'm going to take 10% of that. So I don't include RMUs or FIUs. I do include standard factories, but it looks like I've actually converted all my standard factories. So that's going to be 0. Auto factories looks like I have 15. So I need to find their cost in the construction section of the price info sheet. I have 15 auto agricultures. So that's going to be equal to 25,000 times 15, 375,000 for those. Additionally, I have 22 warehouse upgrades for agriculture. Don't worry about the capacity. That's just used to determine how much storage space you have. This is how many constructions we actually have. So that is going to be equal to 22 of them times their warehouse upgrade construction cost, 22,500. So that is 55,000 I've spent on my warehouse upgrades that have already been constructed. And then one additional one that people often forget is your basic warehouse has a value of 5,000. So I don't want to forget about that 5,000 here. Then I'm going to add all those together. I can use another sum equation if I want. Add together all my constructions, and they have a combined value of 435,000. All my factories, warehouse upgrades, and my basic warehouse come out to a total of 435,000. However, I only get a 10% tax write-off for these. My depreciation is the loss in value of my fixed assets that the government is giving me a tax break on. It's similar to amortization. Things wear down and break, and you have to replace them. And this is accounting for that by giving us a small tax deduction. So to find 10% of this, I'm going to multiply that number by 0.1. Not quite, equals this times 0.1. 43,500. I'm going to copy that and paste it into my depreciation. I'm always using paste values, so I'm not bringing over the sums or the equations I'm using. Another subtotal, so we look at the two cells above it, and this time we subtract. So it's going to be this subtracted by this. Then we have our debt. We have to look at the summary sheet once again to see if we have any outstanding debt. Took out $225,000 of loan. I have paid none of my principal off by January, it looks like. So that means my outstanding debt is the full $225,000. Then interest costs. That's also same section of the loans on the summary sheet. I'm looking at all the interest that I've paid from January to December, adding it all together. That's 168,000, which I'm going to copy over into the interest cost section. Another subtotal. This one I actually have to subtract twice, so I'm actually looking at the three numbers ahead above. So it's equal to this number subtracted by this number, also subtracted by this number. So I'm down to just shy of 400,000, and that is going to become my net before I copy the subtotal above, copy, and paste. Nope. Paste values. All right. That is then what I use to calculate my income tax, as well as my net before tax, 5%, and GST 5%, and royalties. So all four of these yellow tax buttons or boxes are going to be filled in using this really important net before tax and incentive, 398,413 for me. I'll start with the easy ones. This is just 5% of this amount. So it's going to be equal to this times multiplied by 0.05. 19,000 I'm paying in property tax. This some people get confused about. It says that it's 5% of net before taxes. Then there's a little comma that says if we have less than or equal to, just actually less than positive 30,000, no taxes paid. I am greater than 30,000, therefore I will pay tax, and it will also be equal to 5%. So it's going to be the same as that. If you had a negative value or you earned less than 30,000 as this net before tax, that could stay zero. But as soon as you earn over 30,000, you must pay GST. Finally, royalties are going to be equal to 4% of this number once again. So 398,000 times 0.04. I owe 15,000 in royalties. The next one is a bit tricky. I'll try to show you maybe over here. Let's No, it's not going to work. Nice. We're going to use these income tax brackets to calculate how much income tax we pay using a similar process to what we've done in class much earlier in the semester to calculate personal income tax. So you have to imagine a cylinder being filled up from the bottom, the lowest amount, to the top. And you only pay tax at the given rate for the dollars that fall within each bracket. So I'm actually going to start in the highest bracket I've at least partially filled. So I'm going to ignore the 500,000 for this example because I haven't earned over 500,000. So I don't pay 15% on any dollars I've earned. But I did earn 398,000, which falls into this third bracket. The calculation, maybe I'll make a new sheet for us here, is top of bracket minus bottom of bracket times my interest rate as a percent, or my tax rate, rate of tax. All right, so in this example, in this third bracket, which is my top bracket for me, the top of the bracket, which I've earned up to, since I didn't earn 500,000, that's not going to be the top of my bracket. The actual net before taxes and incentives is the top of my bracket. So I'm going to use this number as the top of the bracket. And I need to subtract from that my bottom of my bracket, which is 150,000 for this third bracket. So 500 would be the top of the bracket if I filled it. But since I didn't, I used just shy of 400,000. The bottom of the bracket is the lower number, which is 150. So it's actually going to be, let me just keep this open. I'm actually going to take this number and subtract from it $150,000. All right. Then I need to multiply all of that by the tax rate for that bracket. And the tax rate for that bracket is 9%. And I want that as a decimal. So I need to multiply it by 9 divided by 100, or 0.09. All right, this can actually calculate it for me. I just have to put an equal sign in front. So that's how much I owe for the third bracket. But I actually have to add up all the brackets I've filled. I've also filled up the second bracket and the first bracket. Technically, there is a fourth bracket, but in this example, I haven't filled it up at all. So it's just going to be 0. All right, second bracket. I'm going to use the same equation, but I'm using these numbers instead. So the top of the bracket is 150, the bottom is 30, and the rate is 7%. So it's going to be top of the bracket, which is $150,000, minus the bottom of the bracket, $30,000, multiplied by my interest rate of 0.07. All right, if I want that to look like $1 for all of these, I'm just going to change that here. Then we've got, sorry, excuse the interruption. Then we've got our first bracket, our lowest bracket between 0 and 30,000. I pay 5% income tax. So top of the bracket is 30, bottom is 0. Top is 30K minus bottom is 0, multiplied by 5%. And I'm just going to throw an equal sign in. There we go. And then total tax owed is going to be all of those numbers added together. So it's going to be equal to my sum of these 4 numbers. All right, $32,257 is my income tax, which I'm going to throw in here as a value only. All right, Subtotal. This is a tricky subtotal. Subtract all 4 yellow cells above the net before tax. So I'm going to take this number, minus this, minus this, minus this, minus this. That's my subtotal. Equals this, minus this, minus this, minus this, minus this. I still have 310,000. Awesome. Tax-free incentives. This is the last thing I need to get from my summary sheet. I am going to open that up and look specifically at my conversions through autos. So if you did standards, you actually aren't getting any tax break for that. So I find the best way to actually do these calculations is to add up the number of conversions I've done from January to December, which for me looks like 355, and I'm going to calculate the cost of those. The tricky thing is there's a different price whether or not I have an even number of conversions that month or an odd number. The odd one would have a higher price. In this example, there is just 1 month where I have an odd number. So I'm not going to actually multiply all 355 by the lower price, 1,500. I'm only going to multiply 354 at the pairs price, because in this month, I actually had 58 pairs and 1 single. So I will need to add the 1 single price to my cost. So it's actually going to look like this, 354 at this singles price. So that's 500K plus I have this one here at, let's just call it 1 times 2,500. Then I add those two together. This is that number plus that number. That is actually my total auto conversion cost for having that odd one. You might have more months that are odd. You might have no months that are odd, but you do need to watch for the odd numbers because you get charged slightly more for that singles price, regardless of what industry. All right, then we're going to take that number and we're going to put it into our tax-free incentive value. And last subtotal, I need to add the 2 cells above that plus that. This is equal to 500K plus 300K, 843,000. Copy the subtotal above. So that's just this number is my net profit. In this example, I made 840,000 after all my taxes, adding together my tax incentives. Then the final thing in this assignment is to determine how much taxes are owed. That is going to be simply adding the 4 taxes from above together and then subtracting the tax-free incentive. So this is equal to this plus this plus this plus this. That's only 88,000. So I actually owe no taxes because my tax-free deduction is going to reduce this value to 0. When I subtract by here and I get a negative number, I actually end up paying 0 tax. That's a good advantage of using your autos over your standards. All right, to repeat that, if you have a negative tax owed, whether that's from having a net before tax that was already negative or from having tax-free incentives that are greater than all the taxes you owed, the government's not going to actually give you a tax break in that case. They will just charge you no tax, 0. And then you're going to take that and you're going to put it into your summary sheet under this section right above December. So for me, it's 0. All right, if I didn't use my auto factories efficiently, maybe this was right a much lower number. Maybe I only had 45,000. Then this calculation would look quite different. It's going to be these 4 added together minus my tax incentives. I still owe 43,000. That's a number that I would put in here. So copy it, Control C, and paste the values only. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching. Hope this helps you complete your profit and loss statements as you're on your way to becoming excellent accountants, and also allows you to pay the correct amount in taxes before you move on in the simulation. Thanks for watching. Good luck.